Good morning, everybody. I'd like to this morning share with you the CCC way and some timelines around implementation of that. But before I start, I just want to give you some context around where we come from and where we're going to. Just to recap to the positive behaviour for learning session I led on the 2nd of November. We talked there about establishing norms within classrooms. So the reference around making it easy for the children to behave and hard not to, and us making the weather, establishing the norms within our room, rather than experiencing the different weather conditions and having different items of clothing or apparatus to cope with different behaviours. And I want to continue with that thought as we go through the next term. We've got further PB4L sessions in the calendar, but really thinking about creating norms, routines, and then habits in our classrooms around the school to make the majority of students, persuade the majority of students to demonstrate good behaviour. So I also want to thank you and thanks the staff that contributed to the session just before Christmas, which was could also be known as the getting a bag of crisps session, the nibbles part, and some of the contributions you've given to the responses on the CCC way. I have read through the majority of those responses and made a few amendments, but we'll work through the remainder. So any bits of the CCC way that are in yellow, just references that I've not yet gone through that section. But thank you for that. I shared with you back in November this CCC behaviour review, and if you didn't read the whole review, there were 3 key takeaways. Number 1, a new behaviour policy, which has been written and approved by governors, which is now called our Positive Behaviour for Learning Policy, PB4L policy, will be created and will be implemented with consistency, is clear and fair to all. So the 3 words that staff wanted from the behaviour policy was consistency, clear and fair, when I tallied all the responses up. And this is how we're going to measure its success. The CCC way is the implementation of the policy. So the day in, day out operational aspects of how we are going to approach behaviour, good and bad. Second takeaway from the report was that our policy that's being implemented will explore how we develop relationships and different relationships we have in the school using current evidence-based research and the notion that good relationships are built out of structures and high expectations. So the CCC way isn't the answer to that. The answer to that bit is ongoing training, PB4L sessions for both staff and students. And I'll be talking in a minute about how students can receive PB4L sessions, about training staff and students on implementing the evidence-based research of what goes on. The third takeaway from the report was that we as a school are going to invest heavily in training and time, both with staff and students, to support and implementation and a regular review of the new policy. So we have already reviewed the infrastructure required to implement the CCC way, and there is a current appointment process taking place around that. We've got further potential avenues to explore with that as well, and we also are going to include every week within the Positive Living programme, and working with Emily Townsend on this, I've been working in the first term on this, is each week students will receive a PB4L session in tutor time, led by different members of the school community. So that is around the concept of students being taught, not told, how to behave, and students having explicit reference in the Positive Living programme around that. That will be around whole school themes and themes wider than each classroom, but it's also about, in every session, every classroom, every day, staff training students on how to behave. And that will be linking into the PB4L sessions this term. So The CCC Way is a comprehensive set of expectations for staff and students on our conduct. So that links to the word clear. For me, it's providing a clarity around our expectations of what staff are going to do and what students are going to do. And when we've got clarity and everybody is doing the same thing, we'll start to lead to the word consistency. It also, the CCC Way provides a reference for us to refer to when explaining why the rules are there. We have clear student expectations, and we've got, I know I shared with you in that session on the 14th of December, a draft version of the poster that Acanthus Press has produced for me, and it's only a draft. I'm going to go back to them on a few things, but we need to have a reference point of explaining why the rules are there. So that connects back to our PB4L session. So, for example, students being punctual to lesson, explaining why it's important that they're punctual to lessons, how that links to when they leave CCC and go into employment. So it's all about that explaining why rules are there. So there's also a reference point for us there. So I want to just stress that whilst we've got this CCC Way and we're going to implement it, when everybody is taught how to drive perfectly, and we all pass our driving test, and we all, I think now have to, for some young members of staff, they'll have had to pass the highway code. There's still so many people that break the rules. So even though we've got a standardised test everybody has to follow, we still in society have, if you go into the motorway or go into any public highway, we have drivers who go into the grey areas and break the rules. So there's lots of reasons for that. You've got drivers that are fearful, you've got drivers that are in a rush, you've got drivers that underestimate the road conditions, you've got drivers that are angry, you've got drivers that overestimate the road conditions. But even though we've got a standardised document, this is how you should drive, there's loads of prompts, for example, speed limits, etc., we still have people that break the law, and that's in the wide society. And I think this example needs to be connected back to the classroom. And in our classroom, we have lots of students who have different upbringings, different personalities, different home culture, different peer groups, media pressure, media impact, social media. And in terms of all of those factors that you can see there, we need to be really explicit that not every student understands what you mean by, or what your expectations are of a behaviour. So, for example, if I said to my class, I now want you to work quietly, what one student will interpret as quietly or can be completely different to another student. And that therefore means that the school factors are the environment we need to provide for them. So this comes through the PB4L sessions, it comes through the talking that we constantly have to do with our students, but it's around our clear expectations. What do we mean, for example, by working quietly? What actually does that sound like when we're working quietly as a whole class? Is that different to if I'm working quietly but I'm allowed to talk to my partner? Is that different to a test conditions? So it's really being explicit about our expectations. It's making sure that we're teaching and we're not telling behaviours, because some students come from families where what we take for granted is not the case. It comes through habits and establishing habits through routines and norms. It's important to provide modelling, it's important to provide examples, and it's important to demonstrate what we mean by good behaviour. And we have to repeat this in order to keep our expectation. And we have to be really patient over correcting any errors. And this is all around the room we are building within our classrooms and the environment and the community we're building. Giving the students as much information as possible about what good and bad behaviour looks like. So reinforcing good, explaining why it's good, and talking about the bad behaviour and what it looks like and what it feels like. And this is important to reference in terms of the CCC way, because we've got a common feedback loop. They act, the students act, we react, they react to our reaction, and we respond to that. And that goes round in a cycle. But we need to be really clear that the students see and hear us reacting to their behaviour, good or bad. And just responding to their behaviour is not enough. Research suggests that that's not enough. And I'll quote Tom Bennett again. We can't rely on one strategy alone to motivate all children to behave. So we can create routines and establish routines which the majority will head towards, and we can shift, but it won't be a strategy for everybody. And that's where some of the wider work beyond the classroom is started and will take place. The other bit I want to talk about in terms of one strategy to motivate all children to behave is around everybody has different reasons or different motivational factors, and we have to adapt. And I've seen some very skilled professionals at CCC whilst I've been here responding to that. I want to also just reference a colleague in the first term who took up an idea that I shared around a positive phone call home, which was one of the strategies that she decided she was going to focus on in the first term. And a colleague came to me a few weeks before the end of term and said to me that was just one of the most rewarding strategies that they've ever used to get pupil engagement in the classroom, because those positive phone calls home, one, they were surprised for this parent. They were really surprised to have a phone call on a positive nature. But two, it helped then any future conversations that maybe were more negative. So that member of staff decided to, on their registers every week, to make one phone call per class on a positive line, to give feedback about how well they're doing in the lesson. And I'd like to share it with you because I think it's something that I know other colleagues try, but if you haven't tried it already, maybe when we talk about New Year's resolutions, something you're going to try in your week, just one positive phone call per group. What they also found was actually it was a really good well-being phone call. It really made them feel good as a result of it, of having that positive conversation with the student. But we've got to be careful in the CCC way. We're not going to a zero tolerance, zero tolerance system. This is not a ready to learn system. This is not a, one strike and you're out. The reason we're not doing that is because the research suggests that that's not the most effective way. But similarly, research also suggests that no classroom can be run by restorative alone or social norms alone. So what I'm saying is that this policy, our positive behaviour for learning policy and the CCC way, is going to be coming from a lot of these themes mapped together. And another Tom Bennett quote that I'll let you have a look at there. Good, even great teachers rely on a magazine of motivational devices to inspire and persuade as many students as possible, as much of the time as possible, to demonstrate good behaviour. And there's a reference there to what good consequences look like. And our consequences are not just, you do this, this happens, you do this, this happens. We've got to teach students underneath that. And that's where the evidence-based research suggests has the biggest impact. Interestingly, I've also been talking to lots of colleagues in different schools, and some of the ones locally, there's one school locally that have gone down a ready to learn route in the last 2-3 years, and actually backtracking on that and going to more of a not restorative but a student focused system, is because it just simply didn't work. So we've got to be careful that whilst we are putting in higher tariffs, as it were, for some of our hard to reach students, and I think that's the right thing to do because it will support teaching and learning and support teachers to teach effective lessons. I also think we need to be careful of just being reminding you that the research suggests that this is a combination of lots of different approaches here. So timeline and task. I'm saying this on Saturday, the 2nd of January, because we never know where we're going to move to. But as we stand now, all students are returning on Monday, the 18th of January, where they're going to receive information this week about the CCC Way. So we're going to run in tutor times videos about the CCC Way, the key things they need to receive, the key messages, and doing that in a drip approach so that it's not too much. At this point, we will also the appointment process for some of the additional infrastructure to be able to implement the classroom consequences and recess consequence system or flowcharts, which you'll see in the CCC Way. So I know in some of the feedback that you had on the recess consequence, you were concerned about where those tensions are going to come from, where there's some infrastructure being put around that to enable that to happen. And the focus of our positive behaviour for learning in the first few weeks when we go back to students moving around the school will be about conduct moving around the school. So how we're going to establish routines around students quietly moving around the school to support each other's learning. Staff in the first week, so the 18th of January, will give some forewarning of the consequences which will follow. So we're not going to go back. So we're not going to expect students to come in on the 18th of January and go straight to the new system. We're going to give a period of some forewarning of next week, if you did that, this would happen, so that people are aware of the consequences that will follow. But we'll update that as we go through the first 2 weeks of term. For today, you're expected to read through the CCC Way as it stands at the moment, which I've emailed to you. And just as a note that I've already mentioned, anything highlighted in yellow is to be updated or amended, so it's not final, but it's there. Thank you for listening. I am around today and can take questions or have a chat with me in the next few weeks. But as I say, I really appreciate the input you've given. We will work on this and improve this together. All of the answers to improving behaviour at Cullompton Community College in with the virtual room as we stand now.